Taking the Myth, your topical, skeptical discussion show. I'm Stephen Knight, and joining me is the one, the only, the Iram of Ramzan. Iram, how are you doing?
I am very good, thank you. How about you?
Good. It's been a while. It's quite a late one, this really, isn't it? Taking the Myth for near the end of April. Just squeezing it in.
We're really taking the myth.
Proper taking the myth, mate.
Proper.
Lots to talk about as usual. It might be worth just jumping straight in with a bit of breaking news I've just seen on Sky News, which is yet to be verified. And that's, I know you're a big fan, Abū Bakr al-Baghdadi. Apparently, a video has emerged of him alive and well, talking about the Sri Lanka attacks.
Hasn't he? That guy has died and risen more times than Jesus. What's going on?
Yeah, so apparently he's still alive, talking about the Sri Lanka attacks. I know, and maybe that can segue us onto that horrible incident that happened recently. Multiple attacks in Sri Lanka. I think the death toll was originally reported at something like 300, and it's been revised down, which is quite rare, really. It usually goes the other way. So that's, it's still horrible news, but I suppose that's something that the body count is less or fewer. I think fewer.
Less I think is for singular, and then fewer is for plural.
Okay, I always thought as a rule of thumb, if you can put an exact numerical value on it, use fewer. If you're being quite abstract, use less.
So less than one, fewer people have died.
Yeah, not as many people as are initially reported.
Yeah, we'll stick to that.
We'll stick to that, which is good news. The whole thing's horrible as it is. So worshippers were attacked, Christians. Now, this is during the Easter service, Easter worship. Now, a lot was made of the language around that. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm not sure it's quite as much of a problem as some people are making out, but that's the fact that a lot of commentators and heads of state and ex-heads of states, whenever there's an attack on Muslims, they reference the word, the victims, they say Muslims, there's been an attack on Muslims. However, when they're talking about attacks on Christians, they refuse to use the word Christians. Now, is that just a coincidence, do you think? Or do you think there might be something more to it?
See, I saw all that hoo-ha over the use of the language.
Yeah, hoo-ha, that's about right, isn't it?
Yeah, a to-do. It was a to-do.
A to-do. A kerfuffle.
About the language, yeah. I'm not really... I don't think it's as big a deal, if I'm quite honest, because they were there for the Easter worship ceremony. So they were Easter worshippers, and yeah. I guess it's implied that they're Christians if that's what they're partaking in. But I guess I can see why some people thought that there wasn't as much that had gone into mentioning the fact that these are explicitly Christians. I thought mentioning that they were Easter worshippers just kind of spells it out. But then there were other people that saying that there wasn't as much outrage on social media. Again, I'm not sure if that's really true, but I don't know what you think.
Yeah, so in terms of the response to the New Zealand shooting was a lot bigger, and I'm just trying to figure out what the differentiator is here. Is that because New Zealand's primarily an English-speaking place on the planet, and therefore, in some roundabout way, it feels more connected to the Western world, even though it is so far away, whereas Sri Lanka seems like a distant and foreign land, and we have less of an emotional attachment? I don't think it's just that.
I think it's also the fact that Sri Lanka is quite a volatile country as well. That country has had many, many decades of, violence.
So that's a good point. So you're saying we wouldn't. It's more shocking and requires more of a public outrage because we're not accustomed to that kind of thing taking place in New Zealand.
Yeah, and I guess maybe the New Zealand attack was, I guess it just felt more horrific because you had a shooter who actually went in deliberately targeting people and then live streaming it as well. Whereas in this one, it was just, I guess maybe, it was equally disgusting, but I guess because it wasn't, really not sure. But I think, I guess the fact that it's Sri Lanka and violence isn't really new there, I think maybe that's why it didn't it just didn't feel as much of a surprise. I guess it's
Yeah.
like when a bomb goes off in a city in Pakistan. No one's surprised when a suicide bombing happens in Pakistan. And then you get people who claim on social media, oh, hang on a minute, don't Pakistani lives matter? This city has had this happen. Why isn't anybody caring? And it's not that people don't care. It's just, it's less of a surprise when that happens. And I guess maybe it's similar in Sri Lanka, the country after it got its independence from the British. It just endured so many different forms of violence because there are, it's very multi-ethnic and quote-unquote diverse. I hate that word, but it's diverse. There are so many different religious groups living there. The Muslim population is about 10%, so they're not a majority, but a sizable minority. You had that long war between the state and the Tamil Tiger separatists.
Yeah.
And that followed, decades of anti-Tamil violence and discrimination. There were 2 periods of terror when, you had the Sinhala leftist insurrection, then you had this tsunami, and then a war in 2006 that ended in 2009. So it's
off my holiday list. It's off my holiday list. That and Pakistan.
I know you say that, but
the jury's still out on Kabul. We'll see what the rates are by the end of the year.
Kabul's not in Pakistan.
No, it's in Afghanistan, isn't it?
Oh, I suppose everywhere's just the bloody same to you. Everywhere west of England is just, foreignistan. But I guess maybe the point is like with Sri Lanka, it's just been one thing after another there. I guess maybe there was a different response, slightly, to the two, but then people always say that. People were saying that even with New Zealand, like, oh, why aren't they calling this guy a terrorist? If he had killed non-Muslims, they would have been calling him a terrorist. They would have been calling this guy a terrorist. And the New Zealand Prime Minister made it very, very clear that it was a terrorist attack, and the guy was treated as such. So I guess there are people who will always think there's going to be a difference between the two. People will complain no matter what.
People bring the political and ideological biases to every mainstream news story now, don't they? So it's
I do think maybe they should have said Christian worshippers as well, because it was very deliberate and it was targeted at a specific group. But I guess I'm not going to read as much into it. I'm not going to be so outraged by it, but I still think making it clearer that they were Christians would have helped a little bit, because it was over Easter as well. And, all these other Western nations, they're all, even if they're not practicing Christians, they still have that Christian legacy. And, it's the one time where you'd expect a lot of solidarity, really.
Yeah, well, it might be worth pointing out the British angle to this as well. Apparently, one of the suspects in those attacks in Sri Lanka has studied in Blighty in Great Britain, and they were also reported to be largely well-educated middle-class men. Again, and this isn't news to me. This is not a revelation to me. This is something I've been banging on about since 9/11. That the idea of this stupid, thick, Three Lions-esque jihadist who can barely tie their own shoelaces, that just get hoodwinked into carrying out acts of terror, just doesn't ring true. Most of these men, I'd say, are highly motivated, very smart, come from backgrounds with opportunities, and they're just ideologically motivated. And it just seems like we're still not acknowledging this aspect, the fact that the biggest issue here, the biggest underlying problem in extremism is a commitment to a warped ideology, the power of belief. The amount of significance that plays in these attacks is not being addressed, I don't feel.
I think there are definitely, I think there's two aspects of joining terrorist group. I think when you're, because you have in for example, if you look at Pakistan or Afghanistan, a lot of the people there are really, really poor, and they don't have education, and the only option left for them is to go down the madrasa route. in mosques because it's going to be free. And, and say, for example, with ISIS in Syria and in Iraq, a lot of the people who join, I wouldn't say the majority, but a lot of people who do join would join from maybe because for financial incentives, because a lot of them will be poor. So they will see joining that beneficial to them financially, because there's no other opportunities for them. I mean, that's not me excusing what they do or justifying it, but they do think it's better to be with this force rather than being slaughtered by them. So you might as well join these people so you don't end up getting killed, and at the same time you get paid for it, and there's something coming your way financially as well, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you get the others who are, say, middle class, upper class. They're well educated, as you mentioned, and for them ideology speaks volumes. So they're not poor, so they don't have other problems like third world problems that would affect them. So that's why it's they have that luxury to think of ideology and join groups like ISIS or Al-Qaeda for those very reasons, because they buy into the ideology. I hope that made sense. I don't know if I was just like waffling on with myself.
Yeah, I'm going to cut that absolutely fucking shit, Iram. What a disgrace. No, that makes perfect sense. In fact, you've helped refine what I'm trying to say. I suppose it would have been more helpful for me to say that the idea of the disenfranchised, poor, poverty-stricken archetype isn't the one that's pushed most in the mainstream media, is not necessarily true, not necessarily always true. And I think that jihadism kind of transcends all socio-economic statuses, doesn't it? We have rich, we have poor, we have educated, we have uneducated, we have white, we have black, we have brown. We've had people travel from the Far East as well, handful of gingers. So it seems like an equal opportunity form of extremism, and I think I might be. So yeah, exactly. And I even think I might be wrong about this. I'll have to double check, but I seem to think that some of ISIS's propaganda arm, it might have even been their flagship magazine Dabiq, which I appreciate. I keep pushing on this podcast to an unhelpful degree, but I think they mentioned that they've managed to sort of eradicate racism with their caliphate. They've achieved something the West can't do with our social segregation, because they're welcoming of everyone. So some ultra progressive, woke, multi-diverse organisation, the Caliphate. If it wasn't for all the gay killing and slavery, stoning and beheading, maybe ISIS can sort out the gender pay gap as well. Yeah,
that's just brilliant. We've wiped out racism.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but I mean,
look at some of our best jihadi fighters are gingers, in the West, where gingers are, reviled and hated and discriminated against, here they are, prime martyrs. So there you go.
Well, talking of jihadis and martyrs, we spoke a little bit about Shamima Begum, Spaghetti Bagram, yeah. Spoke about her on the last podcast, very briefly. Young girl from Bethnal Green in London, was 15, headed out to Syria to be a jihadi bride, got pregnant over there several times, has lost 3 kids. She's not lost them, she's not like, oh, where have I put it? Is it, under the couch? The babies died because they, brought up in a war zone, malnutrition, not enough medical attention, just a horrific shit show. Been endless debates about whether or not she should come back to the UK. Now, up until recently, she's portrayed herself as sort of passive. She went out there, married a guy, but she didn't get up to anything illegal. She didn't do anything wrong, I think's the line. But since then, there's been some quite credible claims made that, in fact, she helped stitch people into suicide vests and things like that. So, what a little cunt, Iram.
Hey, look, she was only 15, right? So she's not legally a cunt, okay?
Right.
So, yeah, as you said, there's a report in the Sunday Telegraph, and I think the Mail on Sunday also found out some more information about her and said that she was actually, stitching suicide bombers into the vests so that, the devices couldn't be removed without detonating. And she was also part of the women's brigade that was enforcing a very strict dress code.
Yeah.
So I think there was one eyewitness who remembers her and said, she was wearing bright pink trainers and having a go at somebody else because only she can wear pink trainers. Yeah. No, only she's allowed to wear those nasty, horrible dad trainers that have come back into fashion. What the fuck is with that? First we had boyfriend shirt and boyfriend trousers and then mom jeans, right, which are hideously unflattering. No one wants to go back to that monstrosity of the 90s, which just made your ass look long instead of, bootylicious. And now you have dad trainers.
Sorry,
yeah, I've seen
it.
What was the point I was making?
I suppose...
Shamima, stop with the dad trainers.
Stop with the dad trainers, you little cunt. But I suppose because we sort of was thinking about ethically whether it was justified in bringing her back to the country or not, and I went back and forth on it. Today I'm like, we should probably bring her back, but my concern was a lot of the stuff that she may or may not have done is difficult to prove because the evidence lies in a foreign country, and we may never feasibly would ever have heard about all this stitching people up into suicide vests and dad trainers were it not for these reports. And I suppose what I'm asking is, what should be the maximum punishment for dad trainers? No, for joining the Islamic State. Because if we can't prove beyond reasonable doubt that she's done horrific things over there, shouldn't it just be a case of, well, if you even travel to join this death cult, you should get the biggest possible sentence regardless? Because a lot of these people could have done so many horrendous things, and there's no way we can know or prove it when they come back.
You're right about these people who go off to join ISIS, because a lot of the time you can't really prove what they've done or what they haven't done, because some of them have been quoted in several newspapers saying, "Oh, but I only went there to provide aid. I was actually there to provide medical assistance." Translation: beheaded a few Yazidis.
Yeah, there were some reports of a lot of the people gone over there on the guise of medical staff. I think some Brits as well. I very briefly glanced this article, then stopped because it was halfway through my breakfast. But there's been some reports of British quote unquote medical members of ISIS who've been trained by the NHS and are medically trained, have gone over there and carried out some really horrible, bizarre Nazi-esque experiments on prisoners, and removed organs to transfer to jihadi fighters, and then used organs to intimidate prisoners, just cutting organs out and leaving them there in full view of people. It's the really horrendous thing. It's not up there with dad trainers, but it does make your stomach churn a little bit. But yeah, I don't buy this. I don't buy this shit of, I've just gone over there to provide medical aid. I've just gone over there to work for charities and stuff like that. I'm not buying any of that.
No, I'm not either. A lot of the girls who went over there, maybe some of them didn't know, but the ones who were recruited specifically, they were given so many details about joining and how they would marry a fighter and how they could have their own slaves, etc., etc. And now, so obviously when we first spoke about Spaghetti Bagram, we were told that she would be stripped of her citizenship in February, and her family said it was challenging that decision, and now she's going to get legal aid for it, and obviously that's made a lot of people feel uncomfortable, and it made Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt feel really uncomfortable because of who she is, but it's like, you can't just give legal aid to people that you like.
That's true.
It's there, a fair trial is there for everyone regardless of whether you like them or not, because otherwise it's not a fair trial. So I don't know if some of our listeners might not know about legal aid, but it's basically just financial assistance, and it's provided by the taxpayer to those who can't afford legal representation.
What a little cunt.
Proper. I mean, the thing is, in the years before, legal aid has been cut back significantly, and there are people who really do deserve legal aid, and they've not managed to get legal aid. The people who deserve it haven't got it, and then when you hear this little has received legal aid, you just think, what the fuck is going on? But the thing is, Sajid Javid should never have stripped her citizenship until getting proper legal advice for it. Because there was a case in 2019 when the British government lost an appeal that was brought by citizens of Bangladeshi origin. So they were stripped of their citizenship when they were abroad. And the Special Immigration Appeals Commission ruled that E3 and N3, so their names weren't given, they hadn't tried to retain their citizenship before they reached the age of 21, so it automatically lapsed. So, you know, you've got kind of a similar situation here with the CUNT. You know, so the reason why we're having all this debate, you know, if Sajid Javid had just said at the time, look, government seeking legal advice and seeing what the options are and just put an end to it instead of, you know, just a knee-jerk reaction of, yeah, you know, fuck that bitch, leave her out there. I mean, many people were actually thinking that. I mean, I'm probably thinking that. I have really no sympathy for her, but, you know, as we've seen, it's really proving to be really difficult for the government right now because of the legal issues.
Yeah, and I think he was sort of in between a rock and a hard place because he could not be seen as a part of sort of an already very weakened Tory government to be soft on this issue. So if he'd have started making noises about, well, we'll follow the letter of the law and we'll get, you know, she has to go through the justice process and things like that, it'll come across as very weak and it's very unpopular. I mean, I know Diane Abbott's leaned very heavily on this as well, and I just think that's not done wonders for her and the Labour Party either. But on principle, I think you have to say we should probably bring her in and try her, little cunt. So I mean, it might be worth moving on. I wanted to get your take on the pictures coming out of France a few weeks ago. Notre Dame Cathedral ablaze. Have you ever visited?
I have. I actually have.
Do you have an alibi?
I was
unconvincing.
Yeah, I visited Notre Dame in 2017. It was my friend's birthday, and we decided to go to Paris for 4 days. And one of the places we visited was Notre Dame. It is absolutely spectacular. It's just a magnificent piece of architecture. Whether you are religious or not is not the point. You know, you don't have to be religious to appreciate splendid architecture like that. And it's just, you know, it's one of the symbols of France as well. And you can understand why so many people were visibly upset seeing that cathedral burn. You know, it's almost like France was on fire, really.
Yeah, it's iconic. I mean, I've never visited France. I actually, last December, had some spare time and I thought I'd have a quick European break. And I had the choice between Barcelona and France, and I opted for Barcelona last minute and get there to my Barcelona hotel room, turn on the news, and there's just hundreds of people tearing the shit up out of France. You know, it was during that massive outpouring of yellow vest violence and civil unrest. So I think I made the right choice, basically. But yeah, like you say, you don't have to be religious to appreciate religious architecture. I've visited many historically prominent religious buildings and things like that. I've been to the Vatican, spent a lot of time in the cathedrals in Barcelona while I was there, actually. And there was something very upsetting about seeing that burn, and it's not like I have any sort of residual cultural Christian remnants ticking away, making me think it doesn't feel a religious thing at all. I suppose it's a piece of art, isn't it? It's a piece of history, and it's there, you know, disintegrating in front of your eyes, never to be in that original form ever again. I don't know what your thoughts are on the amount of money raised and how quick that was raised to get it fixed. I thought we could probably have solved world hunger with that amount of money.
I was just going to come to that, and I think you can't really win either way, because, you know, imagine if the French government had put money into that, you know, all that money, then they would have complained and said, oh, but hang on a minute,
church and state.
What about us? Church and state. You know, what about austerity? You know, there are people in the country that need that money. Why can't it go towards them? But, you know, these are people. I mean, it's their money. It's private money. They can put that money wherever they want. I get it that, I could get maybe there's a little bit of hypocrisy there, because some people are like, well, these rich people, they're always trying to hide their money, or they're not willing to pay the tax that they legally should. But when it comes to Notre Dame, they're out there giving money. And there's some people saying that it'll be tainted now because all these rich people have put money into it. But I don't think so.
As opposed to the people commissioned by the church for their labour in the original day. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, these things are important. They have cultural importance. It's sort of representative of humanity and civilization, isn't it? It's this amazing thing that people can go and see, and people are interested in from around the world.
But that's what people go to see when they go to France, and these are the buildings that sort of stand the test of time.
Well,
what?
Not if the fire regulations aren't adhered to, unfortunately. Have they come to a cause of the fire yet?
I'm not sure, to be honest.
I checked out of all the knee-jerk reactions on Twitter. It was the Muslims, it was the atheists, it was this, it was that. These things 9 times out of 10 turn out to be an accident. So it's surprisingly unrare how many times churches are set ablaze by a careless member of staff, or an electrical fault, or something else. So I don't know if you know anything about the cause of the fire yet.
Why are you asking me for? How the hell am I supposed
first of
to
all,
know?
your alibi didn't check out, so I thought I'd employ a little bit of cross-examination.
Whereas you were in Barcelona, so
I was in Barcelona in December, actually. I don't have any alibi.
Well, fuck you then.
Fair enough.
I hope when fucking Spi Bagram comes back, she has to live next to you. How'd you like that?
All right, well, moving on to something else. Look at us, moving fire.
Yeah.
Julian Assange was finally arrested. Been holded up in the Ecuadorian embassy for what seems like forever now. No sunlight. It started off quite a friendly relationship between him and the Ecuadorian officials. It seems like that's become more and more strained over time. Reports of his temper, bringing in guests at inappropriate times, being a general nuisance.
Also spearing feces on the wall.
Yeah.
Go down well with your host. I mean, I tried that once when I went to a dinner party, never again. It just doesn't work. Okay?
It's generally considered a faux pas, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
The old shit smearing. Apparently he had a cat that he didn't look after, all sorts of things, and
what a bastard.
I know, exactly. Fucking hell, the more I hear about this man. But I'm struggling with the whole Julian Assange whistleblowing WikiLeaks thing in general, and I can't. There's something about him that really rubs me up the wrong way, and it's mainly. It's partly the cult of personality that's formed around him. Some of the harm that he caused with some of the things he released, or the potential harm, and the fact that he only really mostly seemed to have anti-Western interest in the things that he released, and the fact that people loved him so much. The left mainly sort of like a lefty figure of love, isn't he? People were so in love with him and what he did, they were willing to just write off sexual assault and rape allegations. They kind of felt that he was above the law, and that really rubbed me up the wrong way. That these people who are at 1 minute in the believe all women Me Too camp, but no, what they're trying to do to Julian Assange is a setup. So I don't know how I feel about the WikiLeaks. I do feel that the American government and things like that have got away with a lot of things that we wouldn't know about if it wasn't for his work. But I just don't know if he's the right person to be doing this work. So it's a confusing topic for me. I just wonder what you thought about it all.
I just thought it was hilarious when he was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy looking a bit like Uncle Albert.
Looked like a salty Gandalf, didn't he? Yes, yeah.
Uncle Albert, I thought. Because even Gandalf looks more stylish compared to Julian Assange. He looked horrible.
He looked like a pissed off Santa, didn't he?
It looked like bad Santa. Like, God, bad Santa with B.O. Yeah, I think one of the judges, it was the district judge at Westminster Magistrates Court, when he was found guilty of failing to surrender to the court, just described him as a narcissist. And yeah, he does face up to 5 years in the US if he's convicted on the charges of conspiracy to commit computer intrusion. But District Judge Michael Snow, when he was in court, said the behaviour of a narcissist, his behaviour was the behaviour of a narcissist who can't get beyond his own selfish interest. And I think that kind of does sum him up really well. WikiLeaks all became about Julian Assange rather than maybe what it was set out to achieve in the first place. And you know, he's had some really high profile people get on board, including Pamela Anderson.
That is strange.
I mean, I think he's got maybe he like hacked into her phone or computer and got some dodgy images. Although I guess everything's out there anyway from Pamela, so I really don't know what the score is there. I don't think he has anything on her because, you know, it's all pretty much been seen.
I did not expect to log into Twitter that morning and see CJ Parker from Baywatch slagging off the UK. Yeah, and I think what happened as well is that these whistleblowers who were massive and you know, kind of sexy rock and roll stars for a time, when they've been exiled, you've obviously got Edward Snowden in Russia and Julian Assange in the Ecuadorian embassy. They kind of became almost forgotten, and I think people got tired, and they seem to be like a very small number of people were still trying to keep that flame burning for them, because they just became yesterday's news very quickly, and I don't know where there were nowhere for them to go after this. Yeah,
he's just been holed up there for 7 years, and it's just, you know, it became almost irrelevant really. Like, oh, is Julian Assange still in there? Oh yeah, okay. And there are so many people defending him online saying, just remember, he's never been found guilty of rape. Well, yeah, because he just fucking left the country.
That's what happens when you hide from justice. You know. Fucking hell.
He's never been found guilty because, he's just been hiding away since then. Gosh, you'd have thought. But you know, so many people.
He's a creepy bastard, isn't he? He's a creepy bastard.
Was it George Galloway who waded into this saying it was all...
it's probably the Jews.
Permission. No. Do you remember when George Galloway made comments about rape? And I think he was talking about Julian Assange.
Oh, yeah.
It was all a bad sexual encounter, and you don't need permission prior to each insertion. I just think, right.
So if I borrow your car, I can just borrow your car anytime I want from then on without asking. That's the deal, is it?
No.
Right, okay, so no, you need permission then.
Can you even drive?
So I think...
Can you even drive,
Me?
Stephen?
Yeah, I drive. Not very well, but I drive.
Oh, okay.
But, so I think he argued, didn't he? I think the thing with Julian Assange was that he had sex with somebody, and in the morning he initiated sex again without permission, and I think that's one of the claims that I'm aware of. But again, this is for a court to decide. I don't know what to make of it all, but I think we can agree that the man's not above the law. He seems to be above personal hygiene now, but he's not above the law.
Oh, God. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but, you know, when I heard reports of him smearing shit on the wall, and there was a CCTV image of him skateboarding inside, I think, what the fuck? Like, seriously, how old are you again? I think he's just a toddler in a man's body, you know, because that's what kids do, isn't it? They pick up shit and then they just like start putting it everywhere. I think that's what Julian Assange is. I just think he's a man-child.
He's a man-child. All right, so well, that's that done. WikiLeaks solved. Should we move on to something that's been, I mean, regardless of what you think about this and the individuals involved and UKIP, it's been quite entertaining this last few weeks to watch Carl Benjamin, aka Sargon of Akkad.
What does that mean, by the way?
It's an old emperor, isn't it? I think it's a historical reference.
To what's the relevance of it?
You know what?
Is this emperor cool and stuff?
According to Wikipedia, Sargon of Akkad, also known as Sargon the Great, was the first ruler of the Akkadian Empire, known for his conquest of the Sumerian city-states to the 24th to the 23rd century BC. Thanks, Wikipedia. Yeah, so it's a historical emperor figure.
Yeah, but why that emperor? Why?
I don't know. He's got a cool beard. Yeah.
Beards are not cool. They're disgusting. Okay, they're unhygienic. I don't like beards.
Okay, beards in general. Fair enough. Okay, so Carl Benjamin, a.k.a. Sargon of Akkad, I've met him a few times. I've spoken at events with him, spent a bit of time with him, had a few drinks. I'm actually going to be at an event with him in America in August again. She's going to be great for the optics. It's just going to be me avoiding being in photographs with him for the rest of the evening because he's UKIP now, and that's completely toxic. And I might as well, for all it's worth, just selfie myself doing Zeke Hales now and put them out on the internet so they've got nothing to shame me with. Do you know what I mean? How this guilt by association works.
You might as well wear a t-shirt as well saying Islamophobe.
Islamophobe, yep. That's how you're treated now optically if you stand next to someone who's quote-unquote controversial. The problem with Carl is, like, don't get me wrong, spent some time with him. I've had no problems with him on a personal level. Always got time for him. He's intentionally controversial. He's provocative on purpose. And the media don't understand this. He's running for MEP for UKIP in his area of the country. And this has been incredible. I'm fascinated by this. I'm finding it incredibly entertaining and a little bit funny. They're dredging up old comments that he's made, offensive comments, intentionally offensive comments, but they're presenting to him out of context. So he's used racial slurs in videos, he's used homophobic slurs in videos, not at gay people or ethnic minorities. He's just used these slurs to make a satirical point a lot of the time, right? Now they're presenting him with these comments now at press conferences, and he's essentially saying, fuck you, I won't explain myself, and fuck you, I won't say sorry. And it's amazing to watch. It seems like he's almost castrating the media's chief power, and I don't think they quite realise what's going on here. He knows he's getting column inches, he knows he's getting reported on, he knows he's getting talked about. They're providing a visibility to his candidacy. People are going to know him. People are going to see this guy who... And they're not talking about policies with him. They're not talking about his feelings towards Brexit or Westminster or social change or all the other things he talks about. They're asking him solely about his offensive comments every time, and he refuses to bend the knee and grovel and explain himself. And it's just a really strange, interesting and entertaining situation now, where the media don't seem to have the power of shame because he's not allowing them to do it. What do you think of the media circus that has been UKIP these last couple of weeks?
I think that, you know what, there's been a complete circus around probably nearly everyone. I mean, Nora Mulready as well. She, I think, did she stand for the Change Party, the
Cooks
Party, the Cooks? And then they ditched it because she apparently made some Islamophobic comments. So you do get people. This is what happens now. Someone's announced as a candidate. You go through their Twitter history or Facebook history and find anything outrageous they've said, and boom, that's it. You've got yourself a story.
My feeling though is, like, what happens with that strategy from the media when the party doesn't give a shit and the candidate doesn't give a shit? Something interesting is happening here. UKIP have always been a bit of a joke to me. They've always had a sort of like clownish figures involved, and obviously you've got Sargon and Mark Meekan, the Nazi pug guy, falling in line with them now, because I think Gerard Batten feels like they're going to bring some new blood. The online community, the young people who engage on social media. I think they think that's going to help UKIP, but I don't think they realise...
Nothing can help UKIP, though. Nothing can fucking help UKIP. I mean, even Farage distanced himself.
Yeah. But I think they're helping Carl here. I think he knows this. I think he knows this is a game, and I think he's playing it well. I think he's taking the Trump template of the media are all smear merchants, and I don't care. And it's just provided him with a level of visibility and attention that he's never probably had before in mainstream circles, and I think that's what he's always wanted.
So do you think all of this is just a giant piss take? Because I don't really know this guy that well. I've heard of him before. I've never really listened to much of his content. But then, there was a story that came out in The Sun not so long ago that said he'd made comments about having sex with children, and there's just one quote, and I thought to myself, it sounds bad, but then I think, was he saying it as part of a wider discussion about something, and was he just saying, look, I can say this and people are going to get offended kind of way, or was he saying it because he was being genuine? I really don't know, and that's what happens when you take these snatch quotes, and I'll get onto that when we start discussing Roger Scruton soon.
He's got two hats, Carl. So on one hand, you can sit down and you can have a very sincere, civil, nuanced and intelligent conversation on sort of political philosophy and society and culture and the problems we have with transgressions on freedom of expression, the impending issues that's arisen from Islam, immigration, things like that. It can be quite nuanced. Other times, you can just call people chinks in his videos, and throw around intentionally provocative things because he knows that's the way to get attention. I'm not pretending to mind read here. When I've spoke to him, when I've interviewed him, in fact, he says, look, as an online content creator, they can ignore me, they can dismiss me. I need to say things that'll get me noticed, and it's not.
Why is he trying to get noticed? Like, for what purpose? Just to get noticed for the sake of it?
Possibly, but he's not just saying these things to be horrible. As well, they are laced with satire and irony. He knows what he's doing, and he is making a larger point at the same time. And now I don't necessarily agree with these tactics. Obviously, they're not tactics I share. I don't operate like this, and I think it's detrimental. And I think he's certainly detrimental to a possible political career, as I think he's finding out. However, what I don't agree with is the way it's misrepresented in the press. So just because he's used the N-word in a video doesn't mean he's being racist, and that makes the mainstream political correct elite's little tiny noggin explode. The fact that somebody can say the N-word and it not be racist. You know what I mean? There's a different train of thought on these things in the wider world. However, there's a certain narrative that must be stuck by in mainstream media and reporting and things like that. So I think that, and the fact that what you said to Jess Phillips, like the I wouldn't even rape you thing, deeply distasteful, stupid, rude, uncivil, a shitty thing to do. However, you cannot get to any of those things and make it into a threat of rape, which is what people are categorising it as. So I just think people would, if you're going to call him a troll or various other negative things, feel free, critique the way he behaves, but let's not pretend he's a racist or a pro-rape or any of these other things they seem to be throwing out. I have to look into that consent one you're talking about, the child thing. I don't know anything about that one, but I do know that I think I've seen him speak about it a little bit, and I think in this video that they're referencing, he does say that he agrees with the age of consent, so I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, I mean, but when you talked about his political career, I think it's just there are certain things that you really can't do if you want to go into public office. And I know other people might disagree and say, oh, yeah, we don't want robots as politicians. This is why we're in this mess, blah, blah, blah. But equally, you don't want politicians going around. And I think he does behave like a professional troll, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I
don't think he'd disagree with you either.
Yeah, I think that tactic may work in certain fields. But I think if you're going to go into public office, it's not going to work as well. It's not going to translate well. And also, don't forget, people in the real world, a lot of them don't really know who he is. They won't know who he is when they're voting for him. They'll just see reports about him and think, okay, who is this clown? Whereas people in the blogging world or podcast world might know him and think, yeah, he's not bad. Don't agree with his tactics, but blah, blah, blah. And of all parties, why UKIP? Because they're basically a spent force, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't really think they have as much influence now because now you have the Brexit Party headed by Farage. So yeah,
I've got
it
no.
just doesn't really make sense.
I've got no skin in this game. I'm never voting UKIP. I've no love for that party whatsoever. But
I thought you were a kipper.
Yeah, but I've got to admit, I am really enjoying watching somebody come at him in the media with an accusation and almost demanding him to explain himself, provide an apology, and him responding with various versions of "go and fuck yourself." I think it's quite refreshing to see. And my concern with this is the media needs to realise that if somebody's not going to yield to these tactics, you're in a way making them more endearing to people. People are going to like the fact that he's doing this. People see the media now for better or worse than some elite bourgeois gatekeepers, and they don't feel represented by the mainstream media. So when they see somebody like who appears to be the average man in a position of political power telling them to go and fuck themselves, it really does resonate with people.
I agree.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the investigative work our own Douglas Murray's been carrying out recently in regards to George Eaton, a certain Mr. Scruton, and the New Statesman?
OMG. OMG. Right, okay. Oh my God. So, Roger Scruton is... I mean, I actually hadn't really heard of Roger Scruton until maybe a good few months ago. I was invited to a talk. I couldn't attend, but read upon him. So he's a conservative philosopher. And he had an unpaid role in the government as well. I think it was something to do with housing.
For the Tories, yeah?
Yeah, it was for the Tories. So a couple of weeks ago, however, he was interviewed by George Eaton from the a New Statesman magazine. And the New Statesman magazine is a very left-wing magazine. So basically, so Roger Scruton was a housing advisor for the Conservative government. And what happened was he was interviewed by George Eaton for the New Statesman. And the New Statesman published the interview, which claimed that he'd said some sort of outrageous things, really. He came out with some damning quotes, and it presented him as racist about the Chinese, anti-Semitic about George Soros, and bigoted about Muslims. And later that day, he was just sacked from his post. So, by tea time, he was gone.
Yeah, so...
and then the media sort of piled in, running headlines like PM's housing guru Roger Scruton sacked after going on racist rant. Number 10 advisor sacked over quote-unquote white supremacist views. So Labour MP Dawn Putler came out with that.
Oh, yeah.
An additional libel risk there.
He could sue for that.
It's okay. You can call anyone a white supremacist now. As long as you're white and you exist.
Yeah.
You are a white supremacist. So, Douglas Murray, who I think he knows Roger Scruton quite well, and he wrote for The Spectator, said, this is an appalling version of journalism, and he was on Twitter constantly tweeting at the New Statement saying, release the tapes.
Yeah, so they released the tape, because this interview was released in print, wasn't it? And a lot of what got Roger Scruton in trouble was the truncated quotes from it that were posted on Twitter via George Eaton. And he not only did he leave out quite a bit of context in the main body of the actual full article, but he also clipped them even smaller on his Twitter to give the impression that, I think one of them, the most damning one, was the fact that he'd said something along the lines of he was saying the sort of communist authoritarian government in China was depriving the Chinese people of opportunities, and ended up churning out Chinese people one after the other were just like robots because they had no opportunities. Yeah. And George Eaton caricaturized that as him saying that basically a variation of all Chinese people are alike. You know what I mean? So it's some racist comment. And these little quotes got Scruton fired almost immediately. And, they responded to this Twitter outrage. And then George, as a result of this, George Eaton, the person who carried out the interview, posted a picture of himself on his Instagram taking a swig from a big bottle of champagne with a comment attached to it. It's along the lines of, when you get the Tory right wing, Roger Scruton fired. So he not only he was celebrating this attempt. So I suppose my question is, at what point does journalism cross over into activism then?
Well, that's just it, isn't it? A lot of journalists are pretty much activists now, rather than just journalists. But the funny thing is, George Eaton, when he was asked about the full quote, because he said that about the Chinese, and he said, the full quote was this. It had to be edited for space reasons, and people will point out, hang on a minute, what do you mean space reasons? You've just edited that quote to make him sound fucking racist, because the original comment was completely different. Now, the thing is, if you're pushed for space, you can sort of shorten a quote as long as it doesn't change the meaning.
Yes.
So if someone has talked for a long time and you really need to get it condensed to a sentence or two, you can shorten it. as long as it doesn't change the meaning. And what he did was he really did change the meaning of it. He was talking about the Chinese government, the authoritarian nature of it, and how there's no
it was a comment made with empathy and concern for the Chinese people.
Even the Chinese Muslims, because he said that he really did not like the way they were being treated by the government, because they're all in these camps and having their brains washed of all their culture. They're being taught to put the party before everything. And he said he had sympathy for that. And yet he was portrayed also as an Islamophobe, because he doesn't like the word Islamophobia or Islamophobe. He said it was a Muslim Brotherhood invention. I can't remember the origins of the word Islamophobe. I thought it was actually an Khomeinist invention, but I'd need someone to just double check on that. But he said he doesn't like the word Islamophobia. He wasn't talking about prejudice against Muslims. But then he also talked about, he did say there was the Hungarian people were concerned about these quote-unquote tribes of Muslims coming in. Now, fine, probably not the best word to use.
He'd also used tribes, though, to talk about...
Yeah, he did. He used that word in another context as well, so... maybe that wasn't specific to just Muslims.
Yeah, it's clumsy language, isn't it, maybe?
Yeah.
But, I mean...
I think clumsy language, but also I think he was talking about it from the perspective of the Hungarians, because Hungary doesn't have a really good experience of Muslims in the past due to the Ottoman Empire. So, that part of the world, because of the Ottoman invasions, doesn't really... there's a bit of a history there. So that's why there's a bit of, I guess, suspicion towards Muslim immigrants, right or wrong.
The problem with this whole thing is, now... Douglas Murray campaigned and put a lot of pressure out for the New Statesman, George Eaton, to release the recording of the interview, because journalists often record with a dictaphone or whatever and then type it up later so they can be accurate. doesn't really matter in this situation, because and then Douglas Murray, once he'd managed to obtain these tapes, now from what I can gather, he wasn't provided these by the New Statesman. Some other source managed to get them to him. They were almost leaked, Dougie leaks.
I don't think they gave it to Douglas. I think it was given to Scruton, wasn't it?
Oh, I'm not sure. Okay, so he obtained it in the end, and when the full transcript of this was published, it can be without doubt now that this was a calculated attempt to portray this man in the worst possible light, and not only portray his views badly, but completely misrepresent them to the opposite of what he was saying. It's not an accident that this has happened. This is... without a shadow of a doubt, a complete hit job. Now, I don't know much about Roger Scruton, and the fact that he's a conservative philosopher might not agree with a lot of what he says, but it's very, very important that you treat him fairly when quoting him. And obviously there was the celebration after he was fired for a job well done. I don't know if you saw this as well, but there was... When the New Statesman finally released their transcript of the entire conversation, they'd also got something wrong in there as well that he hadn't said.
How hard is it to listen to a tape and just write?
And it was it was a massive pivotal... It was the difference between I'm talking about all black people and I'm not talking about all black people. They quoted the former instead of the latter, and it had to be pointed out.
It was about knife crime, isn't it? He said something like, it's
not specific.
It's not really... it's not something special to their culture, and they put, it's very special to them.
It's their culture.
Knife crime is so special to black people,
So,
oh my God.
A mixture of outright vindictiveness and sheer incompetence, it seems.
Blaming Nora.
So, here's my question.
God.
I don't like the fact that people are fired for their public opinions, that those opinions that don't chime with the political correct, line, right? So I wasn't happy when he got fired from the government position. Now, my question is, should George Eaton be fired? Now, it's not the case of he's opining on things that are unpopular and saying things that I would disagree with. It's the fact that he's behaved absolutely appallingly and demonstrated that he can't be trusted to do his job fairly, diligently and responsibly for one of the flagship left-wing publications we have in this country. I think he's worthy of a sacking.
I think that would definitely get you sacked elsewhere. Now, I think it's very telling that he's been very quiet since. He wrote a short piece after this saying why I stand by my interview.
They're going to double down, aren't they? They always double down.
Yeah, forget stand by your man. It's stand by your interview.
Stand by your sham.
Stand by your sham, hashtag, if you got this far. Yeah, so he wrote that, and he's got it pinned. I don't know if he's tweeted anything else since, I've not checked, but that was the last he tweeted. I don't think he's written anything else, and apparently he's on leave, but that was his choice. That was scheduled anyway. Of course it wasn't. He's not said anything since then. So I do wonder what's going to happen to him. It's because it's really quite embarrassing for the New Statesman. But at the same time, there were some people who came out and defended what he did and said, "Oh yeah, maybe he should have got it right, but Roger Scruton isn't nice, so well."
Owen Jones.
It's all very tribal. No, it wasn't just Owen Jones. It was others.
Oh yeah, sorry, he's just
and it just seems to be really tribal. Like, even after it was revealed that the quotes had been misleading, there was some people who were insisting that Scruton was a nasty person and still deserved to be sacked. And I think it's just purely because he's conservative. Now, I'm not conservative, so I wouldn't agree with everything he says. But how have we got to a point where anything that's right of centre is just deemed as disgusting and unacceptable? I thought we were supposed to be living in a pluralistic society where you have all these different views and you challenge each other about them, rather than saying, "Oh, fire him, don't like her, dismiss her, sack her, ban her, whatever."
Yeah, we're all for diversity unless it's diversity of thought, which we're not for. But I mean, it's interesting to see how we're going to navigate. I mean, the internet's provided us with two capabilities. First of all, we can produce incredibly long, nuanced conversations. Not like this, obviously, but, in general. And that's been very freeing to a lot of people, and that's allowed people to really get to grips and think out loud and have really important philosophical conversations on massive issues, right? So you have that in one hand, this amazing capability that everyone's got now. Even people with limited means can produce this kind of thing. However, you've got to couple that with the fact that we have social media as well, which allows us to perpetuate a lie or a misrepresentation or a character assassination within a split second, and it's out there. Now, that wouldn't be so bad. It is bad, but that wouldn't be so bad if institutions and governments and media outlets weren't actually taking notice of these things. But they are responding to the Twitter outrage. They are saying, case in point, this guy got fired almost immediately without any investigation or any weighing up of the truth of the matter. And I just wonder if this is going to have some sort of chilling effect where the people that we need in the public sphere to be discussing these important topics might just shy away and think, you know what, it's not worth touching that issue because it doesn't matter what I say, it's going to be taken out of context and I'm going to be smeared and I'm going to be called a this or a that. And I just think we need to get to a point where institutions and people who are in charge say, you know what, we don't respond to social media outrage, we're not interested. I think at the bare minimum now, in order to get a response from anyone about anything, you should have to write a fucking letter and buy a stamp. What do you think? My Royal Mail theocracy I'm going to bring in. It's
just, like I said, it's everything's reduced to a soundbite and outrage culture. This interview was reduced to a gotcha moment, as it were. It wasn't a serious interview with a serious thinker. Now, you can have interviews with people you disagree with, and you need to handle that in a sensible way. And it's people just don't want to do that anymore. People don't want to have sensible discussions about issues. They just... It's all about getting offended.
We want to know who's the bad guy and who's the good guy now, please. No nuance. Who's the bad guy? Who do we hate?
Sometimes there are no bad people. It's not just as simple as dividing people into good and bad. It's so some people can have really bad opinions or bad thoughts, but not because they're malicious, but genuinely for various reasons. And if you don't like it, then you should have a discussion with them about it rather than call for them to be banned, because what does that solve at the end of the day? Nothing.
Yeah, it's whether or not they're acting in good faith as well. So I'll hash it out all day with somebody who disagrees with me or has an opposing viewpoint, but when it very quickly goes to you have your views because you're a bigot, you secretly hate this person or that minority. That to me is infant level thought. And because we have the internet now and everyone's connected and anyone can sort of throw their hat in the ring, we've seen a lot. I mean, I know I've just whinged about media gatekeepers beforehand, but we are seeing a lot of people who, if they were judged solely on their merits and their competency, they wouldn't be able to behave, act as a journalist or interview people or have a social media following, and there doesn't seem to be any consequences for it. I'm waiting for it. I think the tide might be turning a little bit. I think people are getting a bit more savvy with it. I saw, I was flicking on BBC News a while back and they had like a segment on and it was like geared towards kids. It was kids presenting it and talking about it. I don't know if you've seen this, but they were kind of assessing stories and having to categorise it as fact or fake news,
I've heard of that.
And I thought that was clever because that's sort of teaching critical thinking to kids at a young age, help, tune their bullshit detectors a little bit earlier, because there doesn't seem to be, there's so many people who are smear merchants time after time, and it's so blatant and obvious, but because it chimes with a certain political bias, those people accept it and don't judge them and don't lose trust in these outlets. There are sources that agree with my political biases, agree with my political views, and I'll go to them for information. The moment they start behaving unethically and misrepresenting people and smearing people, I'm cutting my losses with them and saying I'm not going to anymore. I can't trust you. However, there's a certain number of people that no matter what someone like CJ fucking Whirlman says, for instance, his following increases because he's telling them what they want to hear. They're not interested in whether what they're hearing is true, accurate, or fair. And I don't know how we solve this problem without killing everyone.
Yeah, we should just annihilate everyone.
Yeah,
basically.
Thanos snap. Have you seen the new Avengers movie?
No.
No? That's the end of that then?
No.
It's good.
I don't watch Game of Thrones either, so... I've just read Zvonimir Brekalo's tweet, who asked us if we watched Game of Thrones last night. No, Zvonimir, I don't. I'm probably the only person on the planet who doesn't watch Game of Thrones.
You are not. There's a meme going around at the minute about people taking pride in announcing the fact they've never seen Game of Thrones.
I'm not taking pride.
You are a living meme.
I'm just, well, yeah. I've always wanted to be a meme. Thank you so much.
Or meme, as my friend calls it.
Meme means boobs in a few different ways.
Really? That's good to know.
I'm a living meme. Well, no, I've just never got round to watching it. And as the seasons went on, I thought, is there any point starting it so late? So
it is very good. I'm not a guy who's usually into fantasy. As soon as somebody wearing a period costume and produces a long sword, I tend to switch off. But no, it's very good. It's very up-to-date, cutting-edge political battles, but in a sort of like a medieval fantasy context with memes and dragons. Iram, you might enjoy it. Game of meme. So we probably need to mention the San Diego Synagogue shooting as well. I don't know how versed you are in this story, but it's deeply concerning. It's kind of part of a growing trend now of what I described as far-right terror attacks. Do you know much about this one?
Well, apparently one woman died, 2 were injured, but it's 6 months after the shooting in Pittsburgh, and that one 11 people were killed, and that was I think they were saying it was the worst anti-Semitic attack in recent US history, and Rabbi Goldstein from the synagogue was he apparently saw it all. He saw it all, and I just thought, God, that must be like he's going to need some serious counselling to get over something like that. And I mean, I guess it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah, one killed, wasn't there? 2 injured.
Yeah.
Suspect was arrested. A man named John Ernest. He's from the north of California, apparently.
But there was another incident. I think a couple of days ago when a man in California tried to mow down a load of pedestrians.
Oh yeah, targeted Muslims, didn't he?
Yeah.
This is scary to me. This is very scary that we're seeing these things increase, and I kind of worry, because over the years, I think people have really imagined that this type of stuff happens. You know what I mean? They talk about Muslims and Jews as if they're constantly under siege and at threat in sort of Western countries, and that's not really true. But of late, we've seen some really disturbing and quite horrible attacks on Muslims and Jews and things like that. And I just wonder if it's a case of we are seeing this emergence of the far right now. But I mean, like I say, Jews account for such a small minority of people anywhere other than Israel, really, and there's still not a lot of Jewish people in Israel. However, for them to be targeted the most out of anyone is very strange to me. I mean, I don't know, you must have noticed this, but anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic hate and conspiracy theories seems to be the one thing that does unite the left and the right.
It unites the bloody Labour Party. That's
yeah. But you expect anti-Muslim bigotry and racism to fall squarely on the far right. You don't get a lot of it on the far left. However, you get a lot of anti-Semitic hate on the right. You look at the KKK, things like that. Yeah, you go to the far left as well. You get people who are absolutely consumed with anti-Israel conspiracy theories and anti-Jewish hate and things like that. It just seems one of them strange things that anti-Semitism can't just be placed any one place on the political spectrum. It brings everyone together, anti-Semitism. Iram, I don't know if you've noticed.
Wow, how nice. But yeah, you're right. Because they've always been the outsiders. So any hatred of minorities or an outsider, they were always going to be the first to be targeted. So it's not really a surprise. And then, you have this guy in bloody California trying to mow down Muslims allegedly trying to mow down Muslims for no other reason, apart from the fact that they're Muslims. And there is a lot of hatred in the world. And I guess I think this is one of the reasons why people are trying to clamp down on any outrageous comments because they say that it feeds into this. Like with the definition of Islamophobia that the APPG British Muslims has come up with, and it was suggested today that that could actually have an adverse effect on counter-terrorism and jihadis who might use that definition for their own benefit. And it just makes me worry that we get these attacks and you do have some horrible people around throwing around horrible comments, and then this is the result of that. But then at the same time, what does that mean for free speech and public debate? And I guess the first response from some people seems to be we need to shut down debate, whereas I just think we need to have we need to have sensible debate, not just random speech, because there are some people who just mouth off for no reason and just want to be offensive. But I think the key is to have more dialogue and more speech and allow people to speak without shutting that speech down. I think that helps more, because otherwise you drive it all underground, and then these people then go to alternative sites and pick up God knows what views, like conspiratorial views that actually feed into their warped narrative even more.
Yeah, limiting speech is always a bad way to go. And like I say, it pushes things underground. And I've mentioned this before, that just before Hitler rose to prominence, Germany had very strong hate speech laws against anti-Semitic language, and there were hundreds of prosecutions for it. And the mainstream Nazi anti-Semitic publication at the time, Die Stürmer, got banned, and the editors of that were hauled in front of the courts, and the subscriber base just increased as a result of that. So, laws against speech are at best ineffective and at worst counterproductive. But it also treats words as if they're sort of magic spells as well. Like, I mean, look at it this way. I'm a liberal guy. I'm anti-racist. I think being racist is one of the most ignorant and intellectually bereft things that humankind have ever invented. However, saw a racist comment on Twitter the other day, so now I hate black people. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't quite work like that. There's something else going on with people other than reading racist views, etc. And we say, we need more discussion. We need to equip people with more tools, more critical thinking to look at these things and recognise them when they see it. Because policing what we can say. And again, with the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, they are just that, the conspiracies. The Jews control this, the Jews control that.
The Jews did 9/11.
Yeah. And it's like, if you're going to make it illegal to talk, to say things like that, you're just proving the point to these conspiracy theories. You're going to make them think they've got a point. Oh, the state's in on this too, because now I can't speak the truth, quote unquote. So it's silly. You need these people in the full light of day so you can mock them, so you can, counteract their arguments and make an example of them. There's nothing I can read that's going to make me want to shoot a fucking synagogue or mosque up. I don't know about you.
Why do you always ask me stuff like that?
Are we superhumans? You know what I mean? We're not, are we? We're human beings, and we're not. There's nothing especially exceptional about the way we think yet. There's nothing anyone can say or do to convince me that that's a good idea. So it's not the language per se, it's another thing. That's the issue. And we need to get to the root cause of why people have these horrendous ideologies, and why not only why they have these horrendous ideologies, but why they act on them with violence. But we need to look. I've not really looked into this synagogue shooting with much detail. I know he's left a manifesto, and I think he may have even... Did he reference the Christchurch shooting in it? Or have I imagined that?
Yeah. I don't know if that was the synagogue guy or the one who tried to mow down Muslims. It was one of them. But you're right, that was referenced in one of the attacks.
Yeah, okay, so he apparently published what's been described as a virulently anti-Semitic open letter online. In the letter, which appeared on the online forum 8chan hours before the attack, the author, who identified himself as John Ernest, that's the name of the suspect, said he had been inspired by the attack on 2 Christchurch mosques last month, as well as the Pittsburgh shooting last October. So the Christchurch attack was an attack on Muslims. This is an attack on Jews. So I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know what his ideological leanings are, but it's disgusting.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you want to get across before I release you to your evening to start Game of Thrones Season 1, Episode 1?
No, I think that's about it.
Iram, it's been a pleasure. As usual, I think we've covered a lot today. I'm proud of us.
I'm always proud. I'm #always proud.
White pride.
Beige pride.
Beige pride. That is the hashtag for today. If you made it this far, beige pride, please. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for listening to the Godless Spellchecker podcast. The podcast is a one-man operation, produced in my spare time away from my day job, and I love making it for you. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider lending some support. The show is entirely listener supported. I don't sell anything, I don't run ads, and given the alternative and unpopular focus of my content, it's very unlikely to find a sponsor. So there are a number of ways you can support and chip in and help improve the show and give me more time to produce more content. You can become a patron supporter and pledge a monetary amount per month or per episode by visiting patreon.com/gspellchecker. If you can't lend monetary support right now, don't worry, there's other ways you can help the podcast too. You can share it on your various social media networks, or take a moment to leave a review wherever you listen to it. Your support is massively appreciated. Thank you. Think we've all learned something here today?